This land in Winterberry, once known as Cook's Hill, was farmed continuously for about 275 years. Talcott Mountain is on the west, and a view of Hartford is on the southeast. In 1784, Oliver Filley Sr. purchased approximately 72 acres on Cook's Hill in the parish of Winterberry, described as lying partly in Simsbury and partly in Windsor. An existing dwelling on the property, built about 1740 by Reuben Case, became his home. Oliver's grandson, J. Filley, writing in a notebook about his family history, states that he, J., was born in the house that stood near the road of the house now owned and occupied by S.P. Pinney, and for many years was occupied by my father and grandfather. The National Register application for the stone house, however, states that the Case house on the property that Oliver Filley bought was located on present-day Brown Street. There was an old house on that site, still there in the 1930s, known to have been turned into the tin shop when the previous shop burned. However, the current consensus is that the Reuben Case home was on present-day Mountain Avenue, and the stone house was eventually built behind it. Later adjacent land was purchased, making a total of 93 acres. Oliver died in 1795 at the age of 39, leaving the management of the farm to his wife Tabitha and their 12-year-old son, also named Oliver. Oliver Jr. became a successful farmer on this land. As early as 1823, he received an award for the best cultivated farm in New England. About 1806, in addition to farming, Oliver started his tinware business. This craft involved creating multiple household items made of tin. He used an exacting and somewhat secret process known as japanning. This is an application of a black lacquer that retards rusting in preparation for subsequent decoration. Until 1830, tin plate was imported from England and a complex scheduling for production of the items was required. For the Bloomfield shop, Filley had the tin plate shipped up the Connecticut River to Hartford. Oliver's plan for distribution and sale of his wares was innovative. Oliver and his wife, Annis, had 9 children from 1806 to 1820. 3 of the children died in early childhood, but several of his sons, along with his brothers and cousins, as well as indentured servants, apprentices, and tin craftspeople in other towns, ventured out far beyond the boundaries of Winterberry to sell a vast number of tin products. Oliver and other members of his family expanded the tinware business to St. Louis, Philadelphia, Lansingburg, New York, now part of Troy, and even to Canada. He used the best materials and the most creative painters and craftspeople available. In a book about tinsmiths, Shirley Spalding DeVoe, a decorative arts historian, describes Oliver as the Connecticut entrepreneur, a shrewd Yankee, one of the first big American industrialists, who judged trends and planned his marketing strategy. Filley became one of the leading tinware dealers in the Northeast. Oliver Filley was a conscientious citizen who joined the Home Guard during the War of 1812 and was appointed captain. Known for his good judgment, he also served as representative in the Connecticut State Legislature, first elected in 1817. Captain Filley sold not only farm produce, but also brandy, gin, and timber. When his tinware business became very lucrative, he built a large farmhouse on the west side of what is now Brown Street in 1817. It had 20 rooms and 7 fireplaces. The farm associated with this house was known as Massico Farm. He also moved the tin shop that had been on Mountain Avenue, near where the stone house would later rise, to Brown Street. After the tin shop burned down, he converted the farmhouse on the property to the factory. Later, a new shop was built across the road near his barns. J. Humphrey Filley, like his brothers Oliver, Marcus, and John, started in the family business as a peddler, but became unhappy in tinware and made it clear to his father that he preferred farming. Oliver, anxious to have his land cultivated as he and his father had done, told Jay that if he agreed to manage the farm, he would build a house for him and his new wife, Julia Newberry Filley. Jay, at the time in Upper New York State, responded, "Respecting the building and your judgment, if you build at all, I certainly would build of stone. That is all the fashion here." This supported Captain Filley's choice of building material. Two of Captain Filley's Wintonbury friends, David Grant and Francis Gillette, fellow members of the Hartford Agricultural Society, had recently built homes from trap rock quarried from the nearby Talcott Mountain in Simsbury. So Captain Filley built the house of trap rock in the Greek Revival style. It was finished in 1834, as the date on the lintel indicates, and Jay and Julia moved in at that time, a year after their marriage. The house consists of 2 intersecting wings with gable roofs. The trap rock stones range in size from several feet across to just a few inches, and are in various shades of dark red, tan, brown, and black. Large brownstone blocks serve as sills, quoins, and lintels. The broad archway on the facade of the minor wing is a rare architectural element and may be unique in Connecticut. By 1843, Captain Oliver had slowly reclaimed the land holdings of his father's original farm, which had been partially broken up after his father's death and Tabitha's marriage to Isaac Burr. He acquired acreage from his siblings as well as purchasing additional land. The farm continued to prosper under Jay's management. He grew tobacco and corn, cultivated apple and peach orchards, and raised cows, pigs, and sheep. The Panic of 1837 caused the wool market to decline, and farming became less profitable. Jay, like many farmers, experimented with new money crops, including growing mulberry trees and silkworms, encouraged by the Cheney brothers of Manchester, Connecticut, who owned silk mills. The Cheneys had hoped to be less dependent on importing cocoons from Japan. At first, the experiment seemed successful, but with harsh winters and recurrent blights, the silkworm craze was abandoned. But Jay was much more successful in growing tobacco. The harvested tobacco was kept in Filley's warehouse on Brown Street. Captain Oliver Filley died in 1846. Jay and Julia then moved their family from the stone house to the family homestead on Brown Street. Captain Filley had retained ownership of all his property until his death. The Stone House Farm in 1849 was sold to Watson Wilcox of Simsbury, then to Amasa Holcomb in 1854, and later the same year to Samuel Pinney. During the Pinney family ownership, the stone house was drastically changed to conform to the styles and innovations then available, such as coal-burning stoves and crude central heating. The original enormous chimney in the living wing was replaced with a smaller one. A porch was added in the 1880s. A Victorian staircase replaced the original. The south-facing front parlor was where the Pinney family entertained. Additional sleeping rooms had to be carved out of the upstairs to accommodate the Pinney's 6 children. Samuel Pinney became one of the top tobacco growers in Bloomfield. He also grew rye, oats, potatoes, and produced a large quantity of butter and milk. And fully 1/3 of farm income came from raising beef cattle. By 1879, he also had the largest herd of milk cows and the largest apple orchard in town. The Pinney family lived in the house and farmed the land until it was sold in 1913 to the missionaries of La Salette, who had founded La Salette College in Hartford in 1898. The 6 lay brothers who worked the farm lived in the stone house until a new brick novitiate, with its own chapel, could be built on the southeast corner of the property. At this time, the stone house was rented to tenant farmers and their families. The farm at La Salette Villa, as it became known, was largely self-sufficient and provided most of the food for the brothers here and for the Hartford facility. They had extensive modern poultry and dairy businesses here for more than 50 years. Dairying continued into the early 1970s, the entire output of milk at the time being sold to A.C. Peterson. In 1980, the property and building were sold to developers, and the large novitiate building was converted into an office building. The town of Bloomfield acquired the Filley Stone House and 140 acres in 1991 for outdoor recreation. There have been efforts by the Winterberry Historical Society to rehabilitate the Filley Stone House for possible use as a museum. Paint samples have been taken, moldings and other wooden and metal fittings have been salvaged and recorded. Archaeological digs around the house have been done. The pump house for the artesian well has been restored. But so far, expense has prevented the completion of the project. The town has stabilized the house, and mechanical, plumbing, and electrical improvements have been done, but restoration of the house remains to be done. With the passage of time, numerous changes have also occurred with the various other buildings on the Filley properties. For example, Oliver Dwight Filley, a direct descendant of Captain Filley, sold the Filley homestead on Brown Street to the Highland Dairy. This handsome home burned down in 1955. The old tin shop was used by the dairy to house farm workers, and it was taken down in 1937. Several of the barns on the Stone Farm property have also been lost to fire since La Salette sold the property, and the remaining outbuildings have deteriorated from neglect. Currently, a study of the existing outbuildings is underway to determine if any or all of these historic artifacts can be preserved for future exhibit. When the stone house was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2007, the National Park Service took these pictures of the house and outbuildings. The Filley name remains prominent in Bloomfield, and the obelisk and grave markers in Mountain View Cemetery display much of the history of this distinguished family. When the National Register studied the Filley house before it was placed on the registry, it observed that despite similarities to other trap rock houses in Bloomfield, the Filley house is significant in its own right. As the only one in the series to retain its historically rural setting or its farm acreage, it has exceptional site integrity. The splendid isolation of the farmstead on the broad open sweep of a hillside conveys a distinct sense of time and place. Nothing intrudes upon the stark simplicity of the house. The Filley house is basically a vernacular stone farmhouse. Just as the stone house was successively altered based on the needs of the owners and the changes in the style of daily life, likewise the management of the use of the farm evolved, reflecting the basic shift from subsistence farming to cash crops to more intensive specialized production. The story of the Filleys of Winterberry, now Bloomfield, their grand stone house, and the agricultural history of the farmland needs to be preserved.